Welcome to the
Unpopular Opinions.
Unpopular opinions.
Have unpopular opinions.
Unpopular opinions.
Okay, so what's an unpopular opinion?
Unpopular opinions.
To utter such blasphemy. He's got the nerve, the audacity, the unmitigated gall to echo such blasphemous nonsense. Just blasphemy.
How y'all doing? I want to welcome you to yet another episode of the Unpopular Podcast. This is Jalen Hunter, and today I'm going to give you my top 5 underrated players in the NBA today. So stay tuned. When you look at the NBA, there are players that always automatically grab headlines. When you think of just how good the NBA is, and rightfully so. You know, you got LeBron James, Stephen Curry, KD, you got Giannis, you got Russell Westbrook, Kyrie. Those players are great players, and they of course are some of the faces of the NBA. But there are some players that, when you think of the NBA and when you think of great players, their names really don't come to mind, which makes them underrated. Now, there are some players, their names come to mind. They are a little overrated, and we'll talk about that shortly, but we're talking about the underrated players. So, I don't know if this is in any particular order or not, but I'm about to talk about my 5 most underrated players in the league. So here we go. You ever play pickup basketball or basketball any rec or YMCA or wherever it's at your place, and you pick this player because he was just sitting on the sideline. You needed a fifth, and the player doesn't score that much. In fact, he might only score 1 or 2 points, but he gives you about 5 or 6 rebounds. He will pretty much defend anybody. He's a high energy player, and after you win, you look at him as like, yo, he didn't really do much, but he did a lot. That is Kyle Anderson. You see, Kyle Anderson, slow-mo is what they call him, because he is a slow player. Like he's a slow player. But Kyle Anderson was so important to the Spurs. Kyle Anderson, like I said, wasn't the most athletic, and I think he only averaged like 4 points in his career. However, Kyle Anderson is so important to any team. Kyle Anderson is that glue guy. No, he's not gonna dunk on. He probably never dunked on somebody a day in his life. I don't know, maybe high school, but definitely not college. Definitely not the NBA. I don't think. But even at UCLA, he wasn't the most athletic because he played alongside Zach LaVine, if people don't remember, at UCLA. But he was the most athletic player there. However, his nickname was the walking triple-double because he'll give you 10, 10, and 10 easily. You see, again, he's not the most flashy, and he's by far not even the top 50 player in the NBA. But his importance to a team, now I believe he's on Memphis. His importance to a team is clear, and you kind of saw that with last year when Spurs went up against Golden State in the playoffs. No, he wasn't slowing nobody down. Like, he wasn't slowing KD down because that's pretty much who he had to guard. But they were having fits guarding Kyle Anderson. Kyle Anderson always knows how to. He knows exactly where to be. He knows angles and he knows how to get to where he needs to go. He's smart defensively too. While he's not fast enough or quick enough to slow down KD, he does know how to pick his spots. He did force a couple of key charges in the playoffs, and that's just how he always is. Kyle Anderson knows exactly where to be, and Kyle Anderson is a very intelligent player. Again, he knows kind of like how Kevin Love does with rebounding. Kevin Love is the most athletic person, and he's not bouncing out the gym, but Kevin Love knows angles, and he knows how the ball is going to come off the rim. That's how Kevin Love, especially when he was with the Timberwolves, was one of the great rebounders that the league has ever seen. But again, Kyle Anderson is an unsung hero if you want to be technical with it. Kyle Anderson is never going to get the headlines. He's never going to, lead Sports Center. I don't believe he's ever going to lead his team in scoring. But Kyle Anderson is a great player that never gets talked about. And that goes to my second most underrated player. And that's Paul Millsap. I used to affectionately call Paul Millsap the Draymond Green of the East when he played for Atlanta. Paul, he's I'm not gonna say way better, but he's a better scorer than Draymond Green. But he's pretty much a Swiss Army knife. He'll give you 15, 16. In fact, Kyle, he averaged 14.2 points in his career. 14.2 points. 2.3 assists, 1.3 steals, 7.4 rebounds. While those numbers don't jump out, you have and if you look at Draymond Green's numbers just on paper, those numbers don't. Draymond Green looks like a marginal player if you just look at his numbers, but you have to look at what he does on the court. Paul Millsap, in fact, last year, Denver was about a game or a game and a half out of the playoffs. I believe if Paul Millsap, because remember, if you don't remember, Paul Millsap missed a considerable amount of time in the beginning of the season. I believe if he would have played, he would have the Denver Nuggets. If he would have played the whole season, the Denver Nuggets would have been in the playoffs. Now, no, he is definitely not he's not the defensive anchor that Draymond Green is, but how Draymond Green pretty much does everything. If Draymond Green, he'll give you 10 points. He'll give you 11 assists. He'll give you 11 rebounds. He'll give you 3 blocks. He'll give you 3 steals. Draymond Green does all the little things for Golden State, and that's why he has propelled himself to possibly Hall of Fame status. Kind of like Dennis Rodman. Dennis Rodman was not good offensively at all, but he was a defensive wizard, and that's what Draymond Green is. Now, no, Paul Millsap is not a defensive wizard, but Paul Millsap does everything for his team. Or he did everything when he was in Atlanta. In fact, he was on the team where all 5 of the starting 5 went to the All-Star game that one year. And he was the best player on that team. By him and Al Horford, it was arguable, but I would have picked him over Al Horford. And like I said, 14.2 points isn't jumping off the screen, and he's not even the best scorer or player on the Nuggets who he plays for now. Because, you have Jokic, you have Gary Harris, you have Jamal Murray, now you have Isaiah Thomas. And with Michael Porter Jr. coming in, it's easy to forget Paul Millsap, but Paul Millsap is the glue that will determine what or how far Denver goes this year. No, I don't believe they are Western Conference Finals bound, and they might not even make it to the second round. But Denver hasn't been in the playoffs in a while, and I feel that because Paul Millsap is as good as he is with the collection of players, they have a with the turmoil that's going on in Minnesota and in Portland and in New Orleans, I think that this is Denver's year to at least make the playoffs. Again, Paul Millsap is a Swiss Army knife. He'll I'm not gonna say he'll lock up your best player, but he'll slow down your best player. He'll give you the points you need. He'll give you the rebounds you need. He'll give you the assist. Paul Millsap can do it all. And he's not the most athletic player ever, actually. But if you need something, if you need anything, kind of like he's like, what he is? He is a hybrid, a way better, but he's a hybrid of Kyle Anderson, like I just spoke of. Kyle Anderson is not gonna flash, he's not flashy. Paul Millsap can score way better than Kyle Anderson, but like Kyle Anderson, he does everything. Kyle Anderson did a lot did majority of the dirty work for the Spurs, and I feel he will do the majority of the dirty work for Memphis. Paul Millsap, he's a player you don't have to worry about. Like, you don't have to call plays for him. You don't have to do, Paul Millsap is going to do what he has to do because he's smart and he knows what it takes to win. And that know what it takes to win kind of leads me to the third player, which is Mike Conley. You see, and this is the thing that sucks for professional sports, and that sucks as a fan, is that because of injury, we kind of forget how good a player is, especially if they've been dealing with like back-to-back injuries. People forget that just a couple years ago, maybe about 3 years ago, Mike Conley was a top 10 point guard in the league. Mike Conley he's not the greatest scorer, but he was a two-way point guard. He can give you 15, 16, 17 points while locking up the opposing point guard. In fact, if you don't remember, just a handful of years ago, when Memphis and OKC was battling in the playoffs year after year, he would slow down Russell Westbrook. In fact, he beat Russell Westbrook a couple times to make it to, the next round. Mike Conley, and it's unfortunate that not only injury, but because he got that, if you don't remember, he got that huge contract. The contract that was his contract paid him more than Jordan. He signed a 5-year, $153 million contract. Michael Conley signed a 5-year, $153 million contract. The crazy thing about that is Michael, and what people were saying was Michael Jordan never even made that in his entire career. Now, of course, things have changed. Money is bigger these days. And they're just handing out contracts left and right. But when we talk about Mike Conley, we don't really talk about how great of a player he really is. We talk about, Mike Conley, the one that got injured, or Mike Conley, Grizzlies were stupid for giving him all that money. We don't know yet. I think he's like in year 2 or 3 of his contract, but we don't know yet. We have, ever since he signed his contract, I don't think he's had a healthy season yet. And when he does have a healthy season, Mike Conley is as reliable as almost any point guard in the league. I'm not saying he's as good as almost any point guard in the league, but he is a top 10 point guard when he is completely healthy. Again, he's not gonna score and that is a trend with the last 3 people I said: Kyle Anderson, Paul Millsap, and Mike Conley. They're not the great scorers, but they do so much more. Mike Conley is a great defender. He's a great passer, and he is a really good scorer. No, he's not a Damian Lillard when he's scoring. He's not a Curry, but Mike Conley is very reliable, very, very reliable. And it just sucks that when us as fans, we see somebody that gets a contract that we might feel they're not worth, because I don't think Mike Conley's worth 5 years, $153 million to any team. But that doesn't, with that being said, that doesn't mean he's not a great player and he's not an important player. That doesn't mean that Mike Conley isn't a top 10 point guard when healthy. Now, of course, we need to see him healthy, but I remember those battles that Memphis would have with Golden State, or Memphis would have with OKC. Memphis used to be, it was, last year was a wild year and the year before, but Memphis used to be one of the top teams in the league. Memphis used to go neck and neck with the Spurs and OKC, and this was, of course, before Golden State became Golden State. But Memphis was one of those teams, with the rough and rugged grindhouse mentality, and spearheading that was Mike Conley and Tony Allen and Zach Randolph and Marc Gasol. But Mike Conley was the head of that snake. Not saying, he wasn't the most, because, everybody knows about Tony Allen. But Mike Conley was the most important person on that team. Arguably. And I believe he was. So, again, it's unfortunate that we... And I say we because I've done that a couple times. We look at a player's contract like, yo, he's not worth that money. But it doesn't mean he's a great player. I mean, he's not a great player. And that's why I say Mike Conley is one of the most underrated players in the league. Now, this next player, he pretty much does one thing. And that's score the ball. I say he, and when I say he, I mean Milwaukee Bucks Chris Middleton. I say he's one of the most underrated players in the league, because when we talk about Chris Middleton, nobody ever talks about he's one of the best scorers in the league. In the league with, like I said, dynamic point guards and KDs and Giannis's who plays with Chris Middleton, and players that wake up and get buckets. That's who Chris Middleton is. Chris Middleton averaged 15.1 points a game his career, shooting 48% from the 2 and pretty much 40% from the 3, which is a great score. Excuse me. Now, no 15.1 points don't jump off the screen, but like I said, it's kind of like the last 3 people we talked about. You need to watch him play. And Chris Middleton not only gives you a barrage of buckets, but he gives you important buckets, and he gives you timely buckets. If you don't remember, I don't remember who they were playing, but there was about 0.9 seconds on the clock. It was in the playoffs. It was about 0.9. It was the Celtics. In the playoffs this year, there was about 0.9 seconds. Terry Rozier just hit a clutch 3-pointer to take the lead by 3. So there was 0.9 seconds, and who do they give the ball to? Because, 0.9 seconds, you don't expect anything. Actually, I think it was like 0.5. 0.5 seconds, you don't expect anything. You just, okay, well, we lost this one, chalk it up to the game, go. We give it to Chris Middleton. He pretty much heaves it from damn near half court and makes a shot. Chris Middleton has a couple 30-point games, has a couple 40-point games. Chris Middleton can, in fact, Chris Middleton was just, I don't know if you guys saw it, but Chris Middleton was he's always invited to the USA camp, but he was putting up buckets and going toe to toe with the greats like Paul George and KD, Victor Oladipo. Like, he was going bucket for bucket with all of them. Now, of course, when you think of scoring and when you think of great small forwards, you don't think of Chris Middleton. You think of course, like I said, the KDs and Paul Georges and Giannis Antetokounmpos and LeBrons and Kawhi Leonard's, and not saying he's on that caliber as a complete player, but if we're just talking about scoring, Chris Middleton is up there. Chris Middleton is one of, like I said, the best scorers in the league. Now, kind of like Mike Conley, he faces a lot of criticism for being injured, which makes sense. You need to be on the court to play, but when he is on the court, he, like I said, is one of the best scorers ever. Not one of the best scorers ever, I'm sorry. One of the best scorers in the league. And another thing that is going against Chris Middleton is who he plays with. Chris Middleton, he playing alongside Giannis Antetokounmpo is a very challenging thing. Not saying that Giannis doesn't pass or anything, but all the spotlight is always going to go on Giannis. In fact, always going to go on Giannis Antetokounmpo. And it doesn't make it any easier that he plays alongside Giannis Antetokounmpo and a former Rookie of the Year in Malcolm Brogdon, who came out of nowhere out of Virginia. You know, when you're Chris Middleton is the best scorer on that team, but he's not the best player, and that, of course, is Giannis. Giannis is almost is top, arguably top 10. No, ain't no argument. He is top 10 player. He's a top 10 player of the year. I mean, of the in the NBA. So playing alongside that, you're not gonna get unless you're like a Kyrie and LeBron situation. You're not gonna get the. And in fact, look at the Kyrie and LeBron situation. When everything went right, it was LeBron James, was the reason. Every time something went wrong, it was either Kyrie or it was Kevin Love. And that's kind of how it is with Milwaukee. When everything goes right, Giannis is one of the greatest players in the league, or Giannis is this and Giannis is that. And when everything goes wrong, where was Chris Middleton? Where was Thon Maker? And that's when you play with a great player such as that, and you're not on that caliber, because Chris Middleton is not on the same level as Giannis as a complete player, but he is on that level when we're just talking about scoring. And that's why I think he is one of the most underrated players, because again, you don't really hear about Chris Middleton unless you see him, or he goes off. Like I think there was one game when Chris Middleton dropped a 50 bird on somebody. I could be wrong, but Chris Middleton can score. In fact, I'm gonna look this up. Hold up, I'm about to look up Chris Middleton's career high, and I put money. It's in the high 40s or 50. 43. Yeah, so 43 points, which that's still great in the NBA. Chris Middleton, and this only last year. So Chris Middleton is a bona fide scorer, and you give him the opportunity, and you give him the quote unquote shine and praise that bona fide scorer deserves to get, then he might not be as underrated as he is now. But in current constructed playing alongside Giannis, he is a very underrated player. And this leads me to my last person. When you have great siblings and great family members that have played in the league or that play in the current league, and you don't match, their greatness per se, then people really, peg you as a lesser player, and not just a lesser player to your sibling, but a lesser player, period. For example, if you look at Austin Rivers and Doc Rivers, nobody thinks Austin Rivers is, that dude. Or nobody thinks Austin Rivers, except unless you go to Duke or something, or went to Duke. But nobody thinks Austin Rivers is, this great point guard. And he always gets clowned for being the son of Doc Rivers. And this leads me to my final player that I think is most underrated, is Seth Curry. You see, when your brother is a 2-time MVP, 3-time champion, one of the greatest scorers ever, you are gonna get outshined. And no, I don't think he is a top 10 or top 20 point guard in the league, because I just don't see that. Actually, yeah, I just don't see that. But Seth Curry is a really good player. He when healthy, is one of the best backup point guards that the league has. I kind of fit him in the same breath as a Sean Livingston, or now not accolades wise, because of course Sean Livingston is a 3-time champion, but as in how important he is to the team, I put him with a Sean Livingston. I put him with a Tyrus Jones, who doesn't get as much credit as he should now playing with Derrick Rose. Seth Curry is a really good player, but I'm not gonna say it's unfortunate, but it's hard when you play your brother is Stephen Curry, which is arguably one of the greatest point guards to ever play the game. And that kind of happened to Michael Jordan's kids. They were trash. They were garbage, and I think they went to UCF, or at least I think Marcus Jordan went to UCF. He was garbage. And they also said that it was hard living up or growing up with Michael Jordan being their father, because they're always going to be compared to that, and they're always going to be compared to, oh, you're not as good as Jordan. And it's hard. But Seth Curry is a really good point guard, man. I don't think he, like I said, starting caliber, but he doesn't get as much credit as I believe he should, and that's only because of who his who his brother is, which is of course a 2-time MVP, first unanimous MVP, and a 3-time champion in Steph Curry. So there you have it. Those are my top 5 underrated players, which is Paul Millsap, Kyle Anderson, Chris Middleton, Mike Conley, and Seth Curry. So I want to thank you for tuning into this episode of the Unpopular Podcast. What I'm going to do is I'm going to drop this one today, which was, again, the 5 most underrated players in the league. And I'm going to drop one tomorrow, which is the 5 most overrated players in the league. So again, I want to thank you for tuning in. This is Jalen Hunter with the Unpopular Podcast, and I have a clever way of ending these. One time I said live long and prosper. One time I said be cool. Be easy. Much love.
Party people in the place to be. You are now in the midst of a real MC. Throw your hands in the air if you're real as me. Ooh.